I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to testify today. This has been a matter that I've spent a lot of time with the last couple of years. I recognize that you all do not have a bill in front of you and that the bill is trailing. The bill that I understand that is trailing is House Bill 4003, and that it is still on its way to the committee. So I'm going to talk about the situation a little bit generally, and then be happy to take any questions that you all have afterwards. What was likely the cause of the legislation is the need to prevent further schemes to improperly convert home-based businesses from being private entities to public entities so that they can be unionized. There have been two of these situations that have occurred recently in Michigan. One involving daycare providers recently was stopped by the Snyder administration. Another involving home health nurses is still ongoing. Both involve the use of interlocal agreements to hide the activity from the legislature, who has the jurisdiction over determining who is and is not a public employee. And both have seen millions of dollars improperly diverted from some of Michigan's neediest citizens. The daycare situation is the one that I am the most familiar with, having served as counsel for 3 providers who challenged it. In order to set the table here, I want to discuss a little bit about the basics of the Public Employment Relations Act, which is what determines who is and isn't a public employee. Up until 1963 in Michigan, it was actually illegal to have public sector unions. That changed in 1963 with the new Constitution, created Article 4, Section 48. And that allowed the legislature, it didn't require it, but it allowed the legislature to create public employee unionization laws if it wanted to. And in 1965, the Public Employment Relations Act was passed. Now, the important thing to remember with this law is that it only applies to public employees. You cannot be unionized under para unless you are within the definition of public employee. What occurred with the daycare situation was that in about 2005, late 2005, the United Auto Workers and AFSCME came and approached the Granholm administration and said, we want to unionize these private businesses, these women who run daycares out of their own homes. And there's about 45,000 of these people that fit this definition. Governor Granholm agreed with the idea, and thus the Child Care Providers Together Michigan Union was born. And in order to make public employees, to make these people public employees, what they really needed to do was to amend the statute under para to define public employee to include these sorts of people. Now, whether or not you could ever do that is a matter that's currently under litigation in federal court, but if it was to be done under state law, that was the sole way of doing it. Probably because the Senate was unlikely to agree to that broad definition, there had to be a workaround. And the workaround that they came up with was they created a interlocal agreement between a community college, Mott Community College, and the Department of Human Services. And this created a 2-person do-nothing entity called the Michigan Home-Based Child Care Council. This 2-person entity was eventually staffed with these 2 people. It took over a year and a half. It was given a paltry budget of $400,000 to run a couple $100 million program, and it didn't do anything aside of act as an agent for the union to bargain against. Now, so it was called an employer under this interlocal agreement. What is odd, of course, is that it's not an employer in any traditional sense. My clients who ran the home-based daycares out of their own homes, they're the parents who seek the daycare are the ones who hire and fire them. The wages are set between the parents and the daycare provider. The working conditions are set by the provider. It's their house. So the concept that this 2-person entity, this Michigan Home-Based Child Care Council, was anything remotely related to being an employer is silly on its face. Not only that, it really didn't do any negotiating. Here's how it works. Everyone in this committee is familiar with it, and that is the compensation rates for providers is set by this committee and its counterpart in the Senate. You're the ones who set the reimbursement rates for how much providers get. That isn't set by an agreement between a two-person entity and the union. They can ask for things. They can come in and say, we would like, this is the benefits rates we'd like, these are the compensation rates we'd like, these are the benefits we'd like. But this committee, and again, its Senate counterpart, are the ones that tell it what it actually gets when the appropriation is set. Now, the Michigan Quality Community Care Council is the counterpart, and that is done with DCH. It's the home health nurses. It was set up in the same manner. It was an interlocal agreement, did not expand. It tried to do the end run around the constitutional requirement that the legislature define public employees, and it too allowed unionization to occur. The general theory behind these is kind of scary when you get to it, and that is the theory is that any indirect receipt of government money. Remember, we have businesses that are providing services to some sort of grant recipients. My clients provide services to people who are seeking daycare so that they could get off of welfare, try and educate themselves or get jobs. Home health nurses are providing health to people that are getting Medicaid in-home care. And they are the businesses. But the theory is that because there is some sort of government grant, these people are really somehow been converted into government employees. So why would that not apply to doctors who get Medicaid money, to landlords whose tenants have rent assistance, to grocers whose people who are on food stamps. So the possibilities, if one accepts that theory, are almost endless. Who couldn't be converted into some sort of government employee through receiving any kind of government aid? Now again, the Snyder administration ended the daycare provider things in March. The Michigan Quality Community Care Council is still ongoing. There is apparently some decisions still being made as to whether or not to end it. And at this point, I'll just go ahead and take any questions from the committee.
The Michigan Home-Based Child Care Council, and then you mentioned the Michigan Quality
Community Care Council.
I'm sorry, that's too many.
Yes, there's three C's with both of them.
What's the difference between?
They are similar entities. Both were created through interlocal agreements. Okay. Both of them are the putative collective bargaining only employer that allows home-based private businesses to be converted into public employees so that they might be unionized. And then there are union dues taken out of both. The Michigan Home-Based Child Care Council received over the space of January 1st of 2009 to September 30th, 2010, about $4 million in dues. It passed on $4 million of dues to the Child Care Providers Together Michigan, which was the union that was created out of the AFSCME and UAW. SEIU represents, and I use that term loosely, the home health providers. It's getting around $5.5 to $6 million a year in dues that it is taking out of the program that's supposed to be going to help home health nurses. Sure, interlocal agreements, and we just put up something on our website. My colleague who was unable to make it, Kathy Hookstra, just put up something on interlocal agreements on mackinac.org if anybody wants to take a peek at it. They are constitutionally permitted agreements between local governments. What they were meant to do was, up until 1963, you had to have each agreement between local governments sanctioned by the legislature. So if Wayne wanted to work with Oakland about bus route, that had to go before the legislature and it had to get a vote. And so they found that to be difficult and tiresome. And so what they did was that they said that local governments could work together and form those sorts of things. So if they wanted to work on water or busing or something along those lines. Ms. Hoekstra's reporting has shown that over the first 7 years, it's in the Constitution, and I forget the specific article that allows it. I want to say it's in Article 7, but I just can't remember the one that it is. They started off slowly. There was 70 over the first 10 years, but in the last 7 or 8 years, we're getting close to almost having 1,000 of these things now. And obviously, we're talking about obscure bodies that many in the legislature, I'm sure, are surprised to find out that we have right now. There's 998 of these things running around, engaging in powers. The MEDC is one. That's one that probably everyone here is familiar with. There's a lot of MEDC offshoots, but it wasn't ever meant to allow, in essence, the executive alone to try and amend a statute. There's clearly the way a statute is to be amended is to go through the legislature. You all are the ones who have to define, according to the Michigan Constitution, Article 4, Section 48, who is and is not a public employee. You have control over public sector collective bargaining. And the executive and a community college are not the way to amend a statute.
For our committee to consider.
Well, I don't know the etiquette of talking about a bill that's not quite in front of you yet, but House Bill 4003 does a very good job of doing it. What it says is that this provision, this definition of public employee, shall not be superseded by an interlocal agreement, memorandum of understanding, or other similar document. And in defining public employee, it makes it clear that indirect or direct receipt of government aid does not convert one from a private person into a public employee. And so I think both of those situations, both of those changes would prevent this in the future. With the daycare providers, it has stopped. Governor Snyder, Director Corrigan said, look, these people were never public employees, I'm putting an end to it. That has not happened with the Michigan Quality Community Care Council yet. And at some point, there is going to be a governor in charge who might be a little bit more willing to allow this sort of thing to happen again in the future. And so I think that's where the drive for the legislation is coming from.